Okay, live. Yes,
We are live. Sorry
finally.
we're late, everybody.
Okay, good.
Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties, yes, unfortunately, but now we are on stage, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your patience. Once again, we are here with our speaker, very special speaker, Dr. Joe Hug. And I'm sure that you already know him from our podcast on June 26th. So, when we talked about SMEs and startups in Japan and what is similar and what is different about them. So, Dr. Hug is with us today again. Thank you very much, Joe, for joining us and for
Thanks, Joe.
yes, continuing the topic. So, we're going to hear more from you about this. I cannot wait to learn more, as I wrote yesterday on LinkedIn. And we have Tim Sullivan and me, of course, the hosts of this podcast. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, which we apologized for. Hopefully, everything will be fine. And well, before we continue, I just wanted to give a shout out to one of our wonderful sponsors, Kanchu.com, and James Howell, who works there. So if you are into the well, not into the business, but if you want to sell and buy property here in Tokyo or Yokohama, please contact James for bilingual services at james@kanacho.com. So thank you very much for being patient with this. Joe, I would like to give you the floor or the screen as soon as possible, of course. So, what are we going to dive or what details are we going to talk about today? I would like you to give us, the bullet points and then we start the
Preview.
conversation. Yes, the preview.
Preview, yes. Well, the the preview is that there's so much to share and
Mm-hmm.
where to begin. But certainly, I'd like to go back to the first session we had where I kind of introduced what a hidden champion is, because it's still one of those words that, I mean, you can imagine what it could be, but you're not really certain once you hear it. And so even people I continue to meet every week, when I say I research hidden champions, they're like, what is that? So let me just kind of talk in the beginning of today what a hidden champion is really quick, why I got into this research. But then the difference is I'd like to write some notes. I cannot give specific company names because of part of the agreement for research to the company. But I can give you some very interesting relationship between these organizations, and that's probably going to be the major part of today when I give you some of the insights that I've gotten. So the relationships between the organizations that are so similar, yet they are from different industries and also different years that they have been around. The oldest being in the 1800s and the youngest being in early 1920s. So that's what that's going to be today. Kind of a quick review, but then some quantitative information from the.
Yes.
You
Okay.
kind of trailed
We are
off there,
online
yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
a little bit. As Tim mentioned in the beginning, it seems that the gods of technology are not very favorable today, but we are going to continue and to persist anyway. So I cannot wait to hear that, Joe. So let's go straight into the topic and well, hear about that. Yeah.
But okay, so once again, the topic of discussion today is the hidden champions in Japan. And so a lot of people often ask, well, what's a hidden champion? And even if you go to Wikipedia really quick, or you type it into ChatGPT, what is a hidden champion? You get a kind of a general understanding. And these are basically SMEs, right? Small, medium enterprises. What makes them a hidden champion apart from regular SMEs, is that they're quite successful in what they're doing year after year. For the most part, they also are the leaders in their industries, have a large market share of the market that they're in, whether it's a domestic market or like let's say in the middle of Asia or even global. They'll have the largest market share. Another interesting point of hidden champions is that they're hidden, they're unknown, and they like it that way. They don't seek, brand recognition. They don't seek to be well known and recognized easily. They'd rather kind of work behind a curtain, if you will, and do what they do best for their customers. So even if I were to mention their names, which I cannot at this moment, even if I were to mention their names, you wouldn't know who they are. And a lot of times, you'd have to do quite a little bit of digging to find them, and then get to know who they are and what they do. So that's what a hidden champion is. And originally, a researcher professor in Germany found this category of specialized companies. And as he continued to do his research in other countries, he found that Japan actually had more. And it still holds true to date. The original study was nearly 30 years ago. And Japan still has the oldest, has the most, and has the ones that are survived even our recent challenge with Corona across the world. So there you have it. There's something to learn from them, right? And that's why I'm so excited to get to know them, because I believe that they can share so much about survival in tough economies.
Yes. Often we talk about survival of SMEs, also of corporations as well, and businesses. And I have heard quite often that business leaders, they say, well, the economy is bad and, it's so difficult to survive. And sometimes they do go bankrupt. But the thing is that, well, you cannot blame the economy for mistakes you have made or opportunities you have missed, right? And I believe that in the case of Japanese SMEs, of course, the ones who have survived, they probably have seen opportunities emerge somewhere in the distance in the future, but also they have been prepared, or maybe their values, of course, value systems, and then the systems they have put in place have probably prepared them to survive even through hard economic conditions. So what do you think about this? Is this the case, or is it something different that keeps them alive throughout centuries and even millennia?
Yeah, great question. And I think you're very close to some of the discoveries that I've made. So yeah, I don't know, maybe you read my report. All right. Maybe you're part of my team and I don't know. But all joking aside, yes, I think sometimes corporations tend to blame economic hard times. Obviously, it is one reason companies struggle. There's many, but these SMEs and I'm going to keep calling them hidden champions. These hidden champions that I've researched, we asked them that, like, how do you feel about hard economic times, exchange rates, um, challenges such as digital transformation, when you're not really so digitalized, whatnot. And the answer has consistently been that we don't focus on that. It was interesting because the answers were almost the same in between the industry. So um, let me give you a kind of a quick understanding of what I'm talking about. And I've got a list here. And I was going to share it, but I'm talking to my telephone right now, so not so easy to share this information. But the oldest company, and I'm going to be talking about one, two, three, four, five. I'm going to be talking about five companies that I chose. Obviously, we've interviewed more, but the oldest number one company out of this five that I just picked was created or established in 1892, and the youngest is 1922. And I chose this kind of range to give you a sense of huge difference, right? So I didn't want to select companies that were possibly established during the same time period. So you've got this huge range, right? You got this nearly 70 year range. And one company makes food products. Okay, so that's one type of industry. The other one makes like artisan products. It's the best way to describe it. With arts and crafts kind of products, and that's actually two of those. One makes clothing, a type of specialized clothing. So it's not regular clothing like your shirt and pants. It's a specialized clothing. And the third one is makes products for houses. Now that's about as broad as I can get, right? I can't get too much specifics, but yes. So imagine that you've got food, you've got clothing, you've got artisan goods, and then you've got products that go into houses. Wow, what a huge difference, right? And going back to Maya, to your question, like what keeps them going, and the one first thing that was similar between all these hidden champions was they said that their success was a result of their people, of their staff. That's how they became successful. Now that's interesting because you would think they would come out and say, oh, well, because of this product that we created, or because it was right time in the right place. We did market research and we understood who our customer base was going to be. Actually, they start within, right? So they're identifying success from within first, before they start identifying
opportunities. Yeah.
Now that's interesting, and it continues from there. That interest, right? You wouldn't hear large companies say that, and even if large companies say that, do they really mean it? I guess would be the question. Where these SMEs really, really, truly believe it. And I was surprised that they all basically said the same thing in different words, obviously, but it's not the same thing. Next that they said is that, and this is also interesting, is we are the market leader. They know that they are the market leader. We are the market leaders because we don't compete.
Right. That's very similar to our startup mindset, I believe, because with startups, when you discover something, when you discover a need that hasn't been met yet, you basically start working in that direction and you have no competitors. But I'm fascinated by the fact that those small and medium-sized companies, they have been here around for a while and they don't compete yet.
Yeah, I feel like they changed the battlefield, so they have home field advantage. They, like I said, they move away from the crowded competing markets and they create something new, like a different space. So there is no competition if you do that. But two things that I found interesting. Well, first I want to kind of confirm. So out of all those, industries you listed, is it correct for me to assume that they all are in the business of making stuff?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so it's monozukuri, which is a common point, right? Right, which is, and it's also a Japanese strength, which we've covered before here on this podcast. And the the claim, which I believe is genuine, I found it throughout all the manufacturing companies, even the lower tiered ones that aren't well known. They're well known within their supplier group and by their customers, but they're not widely known to everybody else because everything was inside. In my case, it was inside the car, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of them, including the companies I worked for, said our competitive advantage is our people.
Mm.
And the logic that was often communicated to me was we all have access to the same technologies. We all have access to capital. We all have access to high tech equipment. So the only differentiator is our people and another way, our culture, our values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's an interesting fact that, you know, parallels, it dovetails with my experience. And interestingly, it's all in the Monozukuri business. So I thought that was and so I do believe they mean it.
Mm.
And the proof is in the pudding because in many cases, when the market goes down, many of these companies do not lay off their people. They might give them retirement packages that are
Right.
very generous, but they don't lay people off. And that's their nonverbal statement that backs up what they're saying. Like our people are our most valuable asset. So in my experience, and not every Japanese company, but the really good ones, the solid ones. So
Yeah.
just some observations from my perspective.
And
Interesting.
maybe another thing, if I may add, Joe, you mentioned earlier that, well, maybe not all the companies, and Tim said the same thing now, but I believe that there is something about the size of the company. The bigger the company, the more difficult it is to build the culture. And the more difficult it is to keep people invested in the values of that culture, I believe. It takes a huge amount of effort and energy by the management and the human
Time.
resources and time as well. So maybe
Yeah.
there is something there. I'm not sure, of course. You are the specialist here, so maybe you have something to comment. You have a comment about this too.
You're absolutely right, Maya. I remember years ago when I was, as some of you listeners may have remembered from last time. So I was in the military for 20 years. Uh, and you would think, culture, military, easy, easy. Yeah,
Easy, yeah.
you're wearing the uniform and every day you're basically living the culture. So no problem there. But in fact, the military has probably one of the biggest challenge with culture. You can see that when people go astray and do something wrong. Um, so I remember there was a period during my active duty years. We had to wear these badges with the culture of our organization and our mission on the backside.
Okay.
And we were, I don't know why they chose this time. Something must have happened and maybe I blanked it out, but uh, all of the military had to do this. And senior leaders had to stop us occasionally. And we would get quizzed. You're on your way to the store or you're on your way to see the
Yeah.
medical doctor or something. And they would, some senior officer would stop you and say, what
Randomly.
the third mission, and then you're like, oh my God, I don't remember. And then you'd have to read it out. And so they understood that the bigger it was, the more it was difficult for people to
Yeah. Yeah.
understand it. But these
Yeah.
small companies don't have that
Mhm.
difficulty. And I'll tell you why, I think. Because typically the organization is consists of I think today when I'm looking at these companies right now, the average is between 20 to 40 employees. That's it.
Right.
So they're really small.
Hmm.
And what that means then is that you become responsible for what you do. You are the expert at what you do.
Hmm.
And another point that I've found is that in a sense, and not officially, but in a sense, employees and these SMEs and these hidden champions are similar to the idea, more new idea of a DAO. Which I think most listeners are familiar with, right? A DOA.
Oh, right. That is okay.
DA. Yeah. Which is a decentralized autonomous organization, meaning everybody is responsible and everybody is part of the decision making and everybody is involved. But ultimately, you play a key role in what you do and how you do it. So while DAO is a new phenomenon, a new way of describing this, which part of the idea that led towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, other cryptocurrencies and such. These Japanese hidden champions have been doing it without the technology attached to it, right? But they've been doing that. They've been practicing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I always found that there was the org chart, which is the formality, and then there's the reality,
Right.
which is less a machine and more like an amoeba, like a living organism. And I don't know about these smaller companies that you're referring to, but in the slightly larger ones, there were things like rotation, like people would rotate into different jobs across the organization. And one is it made these very well-rounded people, not necessarily the deepest knowledge in each area, but they had a broad view of everything. And the hidden benefit was by rotating, you're also developing relationships with different departments throughout the organization. And then when you make decisions, there's a lot of informal consultations going on among these people who already have these strong relationships throughout the organization. And I found that to be a very powerful culture building method, even though it wasn't maybe intended that way. And of course, it gives everybody this broader view because now you're looking at issues and problems from different angles. Where if you stayed in the same department throughout your career, you would have maybe a deeper focus, but also a much narrower one. Mm-hmm. So do you see, does that behavior ring a bell? Is it more like an amoeba in the way they operate?
Gosh, I don't know if it would be an amoeba because it's not as the companies are not as big, and it's more it could be an amoeba, I suppose, but it's more of a like a unit that moves and synchronized, but requires all the staff to be part of it. I would venture to say that if one employee were sick or took leave, not many others would be able to do his or her job.
Oh, interesting.
So they are that special within the company. And
oh, interesting. Yeah, that is different.
Yeah. So the presidents or owners, when we visited them, occasionally they would show us around and show us a new product that they've got. And then they would ask us, like, what would you make if you had a new product, right? They just giving us an opportunity to give them an idea, and we'd shoot them an idea, and then they'd say, okay, well, let's go make it. And they'd go down to the line to the one person who could kick that off, and then they'd have a quick discussion, and then he would say, this is possible, this is not, and they'd make it. So it was quite, the efficiency is amazing. I'll tell you, it's really amazing. There's no like meetings and let's talk about it.
Interesting. Oh,
it was instant. The They say, this is a new idea from a customer. Let's try it. They try it. And then discussions happen, right? Okay.
Interesting.
What does everybody think?
Yeah. Wow.
Logistics is, how soon would you be able to get the materials in-house? Marketing, how would you market this? So it's like make it and then discuss it, where larger companies are discuss it and then make it.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
that is interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting. So to that point, since so you're saying there are certain people that only they can do a certain job within the company. So now I think about two things. One, the dearth of youngsters coming into the workforce and whether that affects them, adversely. And again, in all the companies I worked with and for, there was a succession. There was always somebody next in line to take somebody's job when they were retired. And that was their job to train somebody and to mold them to take over their job so they can move on or move up or whatever that is. So there's less of that happening. So are they vulnerable to these demographic shifts that Japan is experiencing now?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. 3 out of the 5 that we spoke to mentioned having fear of what's happening with lower population and the lack of getting employees, because not many employees are interested in working with an SME, right?
Right.
They dream of going to a sogo shosha.
Right. Yeah. It's always there.
Yeah. So they do have that fear. But what they do is they overcome that fear with great packages. I don't know how best to explain it, but they have these great packages for their employees. So they go on, for example, a small company trip once or twice a year. Bonuses or upskilling and reskilling if they want to, if they say, hey, boss, I saw this cool new machine that I think would really help the company, and then they buy it for him or her. So there's a sense of belonging and importance, and that my organization is listening to me as an that it's almost a flat organization.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. One company we visited, they had these really large machines. I don't know how to explain them. These really large machines, very, very nice machines, by the way. And then they keep them clean. And the CEO pointed at one of those. Do you know how much that is? And no, $1 million.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And he said, no, it's $5 million. And we just bought that because one of our employees had recommended that we buy it to start creating these new products. And I thought to myself, wow, an employee has that much influence.
That sounds entrepreneurial.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. Tateshi would be proud. The eternal venture spirit. That was kind of what he was trying to do at a much bigger company, Omron. So interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
And I also see how this actually goes both ways, because the company, the small or medium-sized company, it gives that responsibility, delegates responsibility to the employees, but also the employees, they feel the urge to meet that, not to disappoint, and actually
to take initiative.
To take initiative and even to overperform. So, which is really a
motivating.
Motivating. It is a good cycle, because very often in bigger companies we see, the demotivated people, because nothing depends on them. All the decisions are taken on the top of the company and everything goes top down. But with the smaller ones, obviously it's not the case. And as you said, the organization is flat there and everybody takes responsibility for the success. which is great. Maybe that is probably one of the very few ways for a company of that size to succeed and to be sustainable business wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to work in a place like that.
No, me too. I love the smaller companies I worked for and with. I enjoyed it more than the big companies. The big companies, you're a number. You know, it's just so I like that. I prefer it, and I think it's easier to focus people on a mission. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's what we live and die together. Kind of. You know, you throw people in that situation. There is a motivation to work together and survive, and so there's something to be said about it. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, it's quite amazing. The other thing I was going to mention too is that they're in all the companies we've visited thus far, we've got 9 lined up um, for September, so 9 more. Um,
Nice.
between all the companies, another thing we've discovered is that they have a love for everything they do. So I'm not just talking about like the business that they're doing or the creation of a product, but also for like a love for the building, right? A
Yeah.
love for being clean, a love for being on time, a love for just for everything. I just it's a family for lack of a better word, and uh, that's what creates, I believe, that culture is passed on, which is another thing that we've discovered is that they focus on handing down their culture and the vision and mission each generation that comes in of new employees. Um, it is like one of the 4 fundamental things they focus on, making sure that they pass that on.
Yeah. And that's a point I'd like to circle back to, but we're at the point now. We got to talk about our friends and sponsors.
Yes.
And Maya, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, our next sponsor, and we're very grateful to them, is Houze Inc. So they do business in the field of reconstruction and home design and also redesign of commercial properties. Bilingual services there in English and Japanese. So if you're Japanese, if you're an English speaker, you're very welcome. And they provide customized services there. So you can contact Hana Uroshizawa Howell there, contact her on LinkedIn, and the contact details are in the description of the videos and also on LinkedIn. So, yes, we trust them, we have worked with them, and you're
They're
not going
just
to
good
be,
people. Yeah.
yes, you're not going to be disappointed there. Well,
Yeah,
Joe,
for
thank you
sure.
very much for letting us do this.
Yeah, to interrupt you. But you know, it's funny, you talk about the cleanliness again, that's across the board where every place I've ever
Mm.
worked. And I was brainwashed because I started my career working for Japanese. So they brainwashed me into always cleaning up after myself, making sure the factory was clean, everything was organized, a place for everything, everything in its place. Like that's imprinted on my soul, right? But I'm an American. The Japanese come from a Shinto tradition that values purity. And no surprise, Japanese are trained and conditioned from school, even from before school. Pick up your toys, katazuke masho, let's all clean up, keeping things clean to the point where when I would do seminars, which I've mentioned before, when the seminar was over, every Japanese person in the room would clean up everything around them, throw everything in the trash bin, put their chair back under the table, and, you know, in a very orderly manner, file out. And it almost looked like nobody was there. The Americans would just leave it for the janitor to pick up. And I'm not saying the Americans are bad. I'm saying the Japanese do this by default. It's part of their culture, but there are practical reasons to practice it in the workplace. You could eat off the floor in our Japanese factories. It was so clean. The equipment lasts longer. They take care of their equipment. They honor their equipment, and that has benefits as well. So it's interesting to hear that. At the small. It's not surprising, but it was noteworthy to me.
Yeah, one site visit. Thanks for that. It reminded me. One factory we did visit. Um, of course, they gave us a tour and they talked to us about their company, and then they answered our research questions, and we were there for maybe an hour and a half, and it was time to leave, and the president said, "Oh well, we have one more special thing for you," and oh, maybe some gifts. So he took us across the building to another building where most of the machines were, and he brought out this little cart like you would see in an airplane, cabin attendant pushing, and he says, "Okay, take one bottle and one towel." Okay, so we there was four of us, and we took a bottle and a towel. And he says, "Okay, you clean that. You clean over there, and you clean that." And we were on the floor cleaning where we had been standing.
Oh, I love that. That's hilarious.
It,
Wow.
it gave me a new perspective. Like even guests have to clean.
Right.
And it didn't matter who you were as a guest. You were going to get down on your knees and clean because you just stepped on their floor.
Yeah. You soiled their floor.
You put it back where you found it. And I have respect for that. I really do, because they, looking at the building from the outside, you would think, oh, it's a rundown factory that's about to close, right? But you enter, it's a completely different world. It's very clean. It's very beautiful. And it didn't end there, by the way. So we finished, all of us around the same time. And we went back and started putting our bottles and towels. And he said, no. That bottle goes here. And that bottle goes over there. Each bottle had its own place. And then it dawned on me that that's why they had these numbers on all the tools, and they had identified where everything should go, so that safety wise, as you're creating products, there isn't a loose tool, flying around.
Safety and efficiency. So when we used to do die changeovers, most of the time spent by my American tech, I used to run a factory, was looking for the tools, that because they didn't put the tools in a place, and I actually had them do the outline on a sheet, and before they stopped the press, to make sure all the tools were in place so we could quickly do the turnovers, the changeover. So even from an efficiency standpoint, knowing where everything is and having it in the right place, like within reach, if it's every cycle, right? These are all simple organizing principles that have a huge impact on efficiency and productivity. So that's great.
Yeah, if you think about it, and this is why I'm kind of combining my research of the SMEs, hidden champions, and startups. If you think about that, what is one of the fundamental new tools that startups are using? It's called design thinking. And what is design thinking? It's a step process. It's this, and I don't want to say it's a linear process, because it's not.
No.
It's a process that takes you from one phase to the next, and you analyze where you are and what's right and what's not right, and then you can either move forward or up or sideways or whatnot. But it's almost the same, where that if it isn't right to continue moving, you got to go back and reevaluate where you went wrong. So that's it's more of a mental tool that you're using, but these factories, it's more of a physical, literal tool. But something is wrong, they got to go back and find out what happened. So the similarities are there.
Right.
If we look, right.
I have a little, not a controversial opinion, but the expression design thinking is kind of new, based, looking at my career. I feel like we were doing that
Mhm.
back then. We just didn't have a word for it. Nobody put it together and branded it. But I mean, everything, the way we custom design products, we do a failure modes and effects analysis. We would have, we'd be designing the product in conjunction with our customer while they designed it. So, I mean, I feel like people, certainly in the industry I was in, was practicing it. It just may never have been written out in a systematic way. But I take that back. I think there was. We just didn't have that branding. So is it really new, or is it just something that people are more aware of now? That's, I guess, my question.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I also agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't just me.
And I
Don't
think
get
that's
mad at
one.
me, design thinkers. I love you. Don't throw stones at me. It's just
Well,
We love
the
you.
funny, yeah, the funny thing is, and maybe it's not so funny, but well, just like Kaizen, all these, well, let's type the principle of Kaizen, it's reiterative. And design thinking is also, it's not a linear process, it's reiterative, right? So if you find that something doesn't work, once ago you want one stage back, or one phase back, or two phases back, and then you start from there and try to find the right way. And there is never just one right way, or there is just I mean, it all depends on the situation, on your target market and everything. But I think that with Kaizen, the philosophy of Kaizen is very, very similar. And maybe we just, as human beings, we like to find new labels, you
yeah.
know, things
Mm.
that have
And
been there for a while.
and I like the five whys because it's simple, but it was taught in the Toyota production system.
Hmm.
And what was so interesting is how they would logically go through the five whys, right?
Yeah.
And the example, that the kind of the classic example, one thing, you keep the floor clean, right? So if oil starts dripping from the machine, right away you see it because everything around it is clean. And
Hmm.
so now you walk over there and you say, why is that oil dripping? And the answer to that question, the first why, is, oh, there's a leaky gasket. Why is there a leaky gasket? Because the specs are not up to our standards. Why are the specs not up to our standards? Because somebody in the purchasing department
Yeah.
decided to use a new supplier to save money. And the next why is what I love. Why did they do that? Because management didn't properly instill the right values in so those people would know the proper decisions to make. You know what I mean? It's like the responsibility is going uphill.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But that's, I'm not saying that is systems thinking, but I'm saying there are a lot of those pieces that kind of came together that I thought were similar. You know,
Hmm.
but
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, what is also interesting is that, as you mentioned now, Tim, systems thinking, and then the design thinking and everything. And
design thinking, yeah,
yes, all those concepts, I think that they have been there because our brains want, once again, we are prisoners of the limitations of our brains at the end of the day.
yeah,
And the question is, at what point of time we actually see that something works and we try, to make it better. And I believe that with design thinking and with system thinking,
formalizes it
it
almost.
is,
You know,
yes. So that's the point when we formalize it and when we give it a label, right?
yeah,
And even though it has been here for a while, now it is something, that exists as a thing of its own.
yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't make it less valid. No, it probably makes it more applicable, more easily applicable, and easily
And it
understood.
creates awareness. It
Creates
creates
awareness.
an awareness. Yeah, I
Yes,
agree.
yes,
So I'm sorry, Joe. We keep interrupting you and asking, but it's such a fascinating topic. So you must be. I hope you're not too frustrated. That we like to walk through these slowly.
yes.
I was
We
quite nervous last night. So this topic it is not dissimilar to what we're talking about. It's not new, but it's unknown, and
Yeah.
I don't know who is interested in it. But
I am.
yeah. I mean, I am. Certainly, I am, and the reason for that is that I think and I believe that it is the SMEs that will live many of the famous companies that are
Interesting.
here now and are probably going to be gone within 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there is an increasing interest in Japanese centennial companies nowadays because, as you said, Joe, I think that I read somewhere as well that the average lifespan of a new company that is, set up, founded today, it's between 15 and 18 years. So, you know, well, it's not a long life, right? So it's a short lifespan, relatively speaking. And of course, nowadays, a lot of people are talking about sustainability, and it depends on what you mean by sustainability. But in business, sustainability also means longevity,
Yeah.
right? And how do you achieve that longevity is the question, because a lot of companies out of Japan and within Japan as well. I'm not saying that all the Japanese companies are they have long lifespans, but what I want to say is that Japan obviously has the recipe for that longevity, and Japan has the recipe for sustainability. And many people, once again, were coming, to putting labels to things that have been here for a while. The question is then somebody, who is going to dissect that recipe and to put it out there so that other companies can apply it and sustain their businesses for a longer time. So I think that what you do is really very important, because we want companies to be around, because when they are around, they're more responsible, socially responsible. They take care not just of the shareholders, but also of the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. And that's a very important thing, because you cannot do business without thinking about everybody who is involved in the supply chain, in the value chain, and everything. So I believe that there is an increasing interest in what you're doing, and I cannot wait, to just continue the topic, because it is fascinating and there is still so much more to be discovered there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No, thank you. Yeah, I'm on the next round. As I said, it'll September. We're gonna visit nine more companies. Um, I'm gonna start asking if I can mention names, but we'll see how that goes. Most of them don't like it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but yes, Maya, I think you really said something profound, and that is that the definition of sustainability is a bit different with these
Hmm.
SMEs, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
for them, sustainability truly is long-term survival
Yeah.
of the company. Um, where I think a more recent approach is maybe connected to how they create products and services. But
Yeah.
and something interesting to that, by the way, as millions of people follow Elon Musk, just yesterday, amongst all the other posts, I don't know how he ever finds time to post anything, but he said, "I believe," and I'm just paraphrasing here. I believe that we need to return to love manufacturing,
Hmm.
right?
That's, yeah.
Rather, oh, I have this new app.
Mm.
Yes. Well, there is something there, I believe. of course, manufacturing, and we are getting, the modern society is getting away from it. More and more people do not work in factories, right? Because of the nature of our consumption. We consume a lot of IT products and everything and so on. So we do not
Yep.
really get in touch with the monozukuri, as they say in Japan. But I can see that there is a lot of meaning in what Elon Musk said about manufacturing, that we have to love it, because once you understand how to make a tangible object, you really understand what it takes and how much skill it takes, how much time it takes, how much thought it takes to actually go from scratch to the final product. And there is a lot to say about that, right? And of course, as we talk sometimes here on this podcast, the Japanese are very good at monozukuri, they're very good at manufacturing, but they have become good not just within the period of 10 years. It has taken them decades or even more than that to
Yeah.
master these processes. So I can see why there is a lot of meaning in that phrase and in that, statement actually. Hopefully more people will learn that. I can also see, interestingly, as especially in Japan, as we get away from the manufacturing processes, I see more and more people interested in crafts here, and they take lessons, to become good at crafting things. It could be leather crafting, or leather crafts. It could be something else, but all those people, they're going back to the processes, and they practice those processes as their hobbies, which is a fascinating trend here in Japan. I don't know whether this is the case in other countries, but it's what I have observed here among my friends and relatives in this
Maya,
country.
what you just said is just proof that we communicate telepathically. Because I was seriously, before you said it, I was just about to say that love or passion for manufacturing in Japan, there is this baked in craftsman mentality. It's from the time they're young, they're really encouraged to go and, create artistic things, whether it's origami or writing your kanji properly in a beautiful way. That's like really ingrained into the culture. So it's not really so surprising that monozukuri would really be, valued here in one of their strengths. In the US, I think we've lost some of that. I'm talking about the cultural level, where the arts were really, really promoted. And I wonder how much of it is related to that, these value shifts in our society, not just economic, but, it's almost like manufacturing is beneath you. It's, what I mean? Like a lot of people
Mm.
look at it is if you can't go to college, I'm talking about the olden days, right? Then you're going to do manual labor, right? And I think it's more valued here. I think manual labor is exalted in many ways here. Um, so some of that is related to culture, maybe cultural shifts as well.
Yes, Joe, what are your observations here and your thoughts about this?
Yeah, certainly. It is valued in Japan. Um, I hark back to the days when I was in elementary school, growing up in America, the first few years after I immigrated, and I remember seeing my first McDonald's. Right, what is
Yeah.
that? I think I was
Yeah.
10 years old, and I had never seen a McDonald's before, but I had never seen a lot of things before. Uh, and I remember, things like Snickers. And I'm picking on Snickers. Sorry, Snickers, if you're listening. But, and here I am, 50 years later, and it's the same Snickers.
Right.
And that is something you don't see in Japan.
Right. Continuous improvement or adaptation.
Yeah. And sometimes I get frustrated because they create something that's so wonderful, and you're just hoping that it's okay. I hope they don't get rid of it. I hope they don't get rid of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
They do.
It's fleeting.
Ah,
Yeah,
should have bought a
yeah.
box. But what that means to me then is that manufacturing it's such an art form that these companies are never satisfied. And that was something else that in our discovery of that was related between these 5 different companies that I mentioned today, is that um, they focus on selling value and listening to their customer to continuously create.
Right.
They all said the same thing.
Yes. Listening to the customer. It's always been here. And you know, I just remembered something, if you don't mind me sharing this. So I worked in the outbound travel industry until 2 years ago here. And maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, suddenly, you know, with the advent of all the platforms and the applications online that were created, you know, for anything, you know, accounting or even, you know, gaming or whatever. So back then, everybody was, you know, talking in the Western world, you know, how important user experience was. And of course it was, but it sounded as if they were just rediscovering the wheel, because the travel agencies in Japan, for them, it was always, you know, the customer first. And many of those travel agencies, they would go out of their way and they would organize actually meetings like, how do you call them? I don't remember the word for
Focus
that.
groups.
No, focus groups, but they weren't exactly focus groups, but they would
Okay.
invite, you know, their customers and have meetings with them and ask them what they found, well, you know, what was lacking in the
Right.
package tours, you know, they had experienced the year before, what they
Right.
thought could be improved. And also there were other things, you know, that those companies, they would introduce the new products and then watch out for the reaction of the customers there,
Right.
and then of course, you know, improve the new products and so on. And that was fascinating to me because it's so much work, you know, to get all those people together, to contact them and so on. And they would do it on a regular basis, and that was because the
Yeah.
user experience for them was already there. Even though they didn't call it user experience, they listened.
Mm.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
travel
Voice of the
agencies listened
customer. Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
customer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That
So
was. Yeah, it's funny you were saying that it was an art, Joe, you know, to the Japanese
mhm.
manufacturer. And it's funny you said that because I always thought that Henry Ford made manufacturing a science. The
Mm.
Japanese adapted the science and turned it into an art. Like they combined their craftsman mentality with the scientific method that Henry Ford used, and they came up with, you know, the Toyota production system, which everybody tried to emulate. Um, so the fact that they made it an art also makes sense that they have a passion for it. They do have a love for it, and they're very proud of it. So it's so interesting. Wow, this is great.
Yeah, I think you know, as I continue visiting and interviewing the CEOs of these companies, um, I'm trying in the way we deliver the questions, but I'm trying to see what is the secret sauce, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I've discovered that really there is no secret sauce. There's
Mm,
no, you
yeah,
know, special methodology,
yeah. No silver bullet.
right? The silver bullet, but it's holistically
mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
going. It's the whole picture, and 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 I think you know, it seems that I'm jumping here, but I believe, strongly believe, because part of my research, I also visit venture capital companies. I visit studios, startup studios, incubators and accelerators, and I talk to new startups. And I think something that the entrepreneurial ecosystem can learn from all of this is that there is no secret sauce. Don't
Mm,
don't don't believe that there is this, you know, 10 steps and you're going to make it.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, create a strong culture behind something that you believe,
yeah,
and put together a team that will support you in your journey and that you can rely on, just like these SMEs, right? They rely on their employees heavily. And you give them the autonomy and you give them the encouragement to continuously innovate so that you can finally find that one thing that makes you successful. And I think those are lessons that can be learned, that can be, passed on through these two different worlds, if you will.
Yeah. And I still think I agree with you, and the Japanese are amazing in that they have this knack for looking at the reality and adapting like making it work with their values, like tapping into their own strengths and their values and adapting accordingly. And I had this experience in concrete ways because when I ran an American factory, I couldn't just transplant the Japanese way. I had to figure out what worked with this group of diverse people. And we had to try to adapt. And to me, that's the secret sauce, if there is it. It's learning to adapt within your value system, your strengths. And I think we can learn a lot from the Japanese on that front. Just
Yeah.
It's a challenge for sure. A lot of times people think it's the product that's going to make you successful. Right? We just got to find the right product or the right,
yeah.
solution. It turns out to be that's not the product or solution, rather
the process or the system,
the belief behind it, and really the sweat and tears that you put into it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that, yes.
Well, it has been a fun discussion. So much fun that we went over 5 minutes. So, Maya, I know you probably want to tie this all together, and hopefully we can have Joe back again for more interesting discussions on this topic.
Yes,
I love
we're
it.
going. Yes, we have, another
We can't forget our
engagement.
sponsors. Yeah,
We cannot
before
forget
we
our
go.
sponsors. Well, yes, but I wanted to say that yes, Dr. Joe Hug is going to be with us in August. So please, yes, we cannot wait. I cannot wait for that next session with Joe. Actually, so Joe, thank you very much indeed for
Thank you.
this discussion. And yes, also for all the insights, because there are so many of them. I'm sure that we haven't even scratched the surface with the discussion today. There are so many others. So let's continue the discussion in August. Thank you everybody thank you to everybody who joined us today. And of course, once again, a shout out to our sponsors, Kanchu.com. And James, Kanchu.com offers bilingual services in buying and selling real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. And Houze Inc. and Hannah Urushizawa Howell, well, she and her company, they offer bilingual services in custom home design and construction, renovation as well. If you are here in Japan, based in the Kanto area, do not hesitate to contact them.
Yeah.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Joe.
Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.